This is Body, Brain, and Pain. I'm Erin Babineau.
And I'm Michelle Steggy.
We are two doctors of physical therapy and orthopedic specialists here to have an approachable and courageous conversation about pain and our bodies that will be forever changing and aging.
This podcast is for everyone, not just medical providers. The better you understand pain, the more control you gain. Welcome back, everyone. Today, Erin and I want to answer a couple of the questions that we have received from the audience since we started our podcast. So the first question is really great because it's one we are constantly answering for our friends and family, as well as guiding people through in the clinic. The question is, when is it healthy to push your physical limits, and when do we need to rest, both physically and mentally? And the second question we'll cover relates to this as well, and it is, how do I know when it's a type of pain that is low grade and familiar pain I've been managing versus something that is changing and I should seek help for? So before we get into specifically answering these questions, let's start with defining the different types of pain that may occur with activity.
We think it's super important to clarify that because it's hard to know if something's changing if we're not knowing our baseline and different types of pain, because there are, we like to say, good or normal pains, like our audience asked, and there are pains where, yep, let's get some help for that. And the first type of pain is what I think most people are probably familiar with, but it is when you have a strain or an acute injury, meaning you have this incident and you have an influx of pain that feels different than any persistent little ache and pain you've had. And we usually call that, an acute injury. That's where you step off the curb and sprain that ankle or something like that. And usually we say those you want to address probably sooner than later. You do have direct access to physical therapy in the state of Minnesota, so you can check in with your PT. And usually, we know if you should be fit to see us or not, and if that's something that we need further care for, or we can just address right away and get going with some movement and rehab. So the other one is a strain, and that's can be different strains in our body, but that kind of is a gradual newer thing that comes on, maybe with a new training program or change in volume or activity. And then we have another type that starts as a strain, but now it's progressively getting kind of worse and affecting your function and sleep, and it's getting pretty persistent. So we are seeing this a lot with the pandemic, actually, because it's very human of us to kind of wait something out, which that's not a bad thing. And I encourage it to a lot of patients when it's kind of, we know it's musculoskeletal and kind of a little strain that started with maybe new volume, and you're very aware of that. But generally with the gap in care, we've been seeing some of those things have been sticking around a little too long. And that's when things get a little more into your nervous system, which we don't like. So Michelle, you have a good general rule of thumb for people that you tell people, and I use this too.
Yeah, so typically when you're looking at those last couple examples that you mentioned, Erin, the strain that's coming on from a new program, that's something that we would expect.
Yeah.
It's new activity, your body is adapting to that activity, and we would expect you to feel some things that you're not used to because of that. It's when that progressively starts to affect your function, it's getting worse, it's not getting better. That's when we have to do something. But as Erin alluded to, sometimes waiting a little while is okay in those situations just to see what happens. And so as a rule of thumb, we like to say typically, 10 to 14 days of just waiting after something that, again, is not an immediate acute concern. There's nothing severe, but just something that you're not really sure about. Waiting a little while to just give time a chance to see what happens can be really helpful. But anything beyond that 2 to 4 week time frame is not something that you want to just keep waiting on. And so somewhere between that 2 and 4 weeks, if it's still lingering, that's a great time to check in with a PT. And like Erin said, if we'll make sure that you're in the right place, and if it's not something that we can address, then we're going to refer you to somebody that can help you. But a lot of times that check-in with the PT can be very simple, just to get you a few things that are going to get you back on the right track.
Yeah.
And and the importance of that in that window of 2 to 4 weeks is that things that you're waiting to address longer than that can turn into this persistent pain that we've talked about in the past. And so 2/3 of chronic or persistent pain actually stems from an injury that wasn't fully rehabbed, or a person wasn't fully educated on, or they didn't fully address it early. And so that's why this is so important, is because it's something that can start as that acute injury. There's actually tissue injury, but as it prolongs, as that tissue is healing, sometimes it can become that nervous system problem.
Right. And I always tell people, you know, we're not saying this because something's crazy injured or crazy
Right.
damaged. We know a lot of times, it'll be that 10 to 12 weeks when ligaments heal and certain soft tissues heal, but you still have pain. So now we're talking about, again, that nervous system, that alarm system is starting to change and get kind of overprotective. And so that's why it's so important that you get some help sooner rather than later in those situations.
Yep. And more than anything else, too, it's just having that expert that's going to help you determine what the course of action is, and whether it's just more education on what you're experiencing, and knowing how to address it and move forward so that it doesn't turn into something that's persistent.
Absolutely. Education is power, and it takes the
Yep.
fear away in a lot of those situations, which is huge.
Yep.
To kind of stem off that second question of when do I need to go in, and it's not just my typical kind of low grade pain I've dealt with and I know what I need to do. And we do have people who come in, once a year for their kind of annual PT check in, and they're very aware of their kind of persistent neuromuscular stuff that happens with their day to day life. And they just want to stay on top of it. And they do that through body check ins and getting an objective set of eyes on them to have a plan. And also, there is some peace of mind with that too. And there's a lot of preventative care with that peace of mind of, oh, wow, yeah, this is just still my same stuff. And this is what I need to work on to keep this under wraps. And that's great. We love that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we have plenty of evidence to support early care for the
Yeah.
best outcomes in either of those situations, whether it's an
Yeah.
acute injury or whether it's something that's been persistent and has changed a little bit.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
and that's a good way to come back to that first question of when do we push and when do we rest? Because if you're having some of these aches and pains, how do you know? Oftentimes when it goes from that strain to something that's more persistent, like we mentioned at the beginning, a lot of times it's a volume issue where the volume of an activity has increased faster or more than what that person's body can tolerate. And so knowing when to push is a lot of based on some of those other things that we look at. And again, it's so person specific, but that's where a physical therapist can be super helpful in helping determine that. But also another good resource is our past episode where we talked about nudging. It was episode 7. If you guys haven't listened to it, it would be a great one to check out because it helps us determine, and the whole episode is talking about when to nudge into pain and when not to, and having those boundaries.
And general rule of thumb with that, without going into too much detail, is in certain situations we expect kind of going up in pain, maybe minimally to moderately, and that's completely normal, like Michelle said. But we don't want crazy flares or, want pain that you're grimacing through. A great example is, we'll talk about progressions in a second, but there's a concept called delayed onset muscle soreness. And that
Yep.
is when we kind of overexert over and over with these volume changes. I like the shorthand of DOMS. It's a fun party fact. DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. And that's normal to feel once in a while, where you get really pretty sore and it peaks, 2 to 3 days later. But it's not normal, like you were saying, Michelle, to keep doing that over and over again. And
It shouldn't be
again,
constant.
it can't be constant.
Yep.
Your body will
Yeah.
start to react. So,
Yeah, but that's a good thing to bring up because we expect that delayed onset muscle soreness when you are challenging your body more than
yes.
it's used to, and that's how you actually make changes in strength.
Yep.
But that is why rest also is so important. You can't do those heavy squats 5 days a week
Exactly.
because you're not giving your body time to recover and rest from that. And so, any program that you're going to see as far as training goes, they have rest days for a reason because your body has to recover from that higher intensity activity.
Yeah. And you'll start to notice, we said this in the beginning, if your body isn't resting, that is when we start to have functional changes and
Yeah,
changes in sleep, or it's waking us up at night, and that is not normal. And
right.
so that is, again, when you should go in and get some advice. And maybe it's just looking at what you're doing for volume, which, oh my goodness, we are coaching people in the community all the time on volume control.
Yeah.
So progressions I also like to bring up is, and we bring this up a lot in the clinic, but we really do progress when we're doing new things or new movements. We like to stress at first easing into things, high reps, lower load. So you are working on that neuromuscular reeducation and control. And that's really important for most people, especially when we're starting new activities. So you're learning how to use certain muscle groups before we get you into that, yes, loaded squat or plyometric work. So neuromuscular reeducation, when people see me, I always say, hang tight with me for 3 weeks, because we just have to get you built up so that your body can tolerate the amount of activity you like to do. So true neuromuscular reeducation actually takes 6 to 8 weeks, but we can start to feel some of those changes within the first month or so. These are your typical high rep, low load, getting your nervous system and your brain firing muscles how we want you to do things. And that takes conscious effort and thought and can be hard. And that's completely normal. I remind people in sessions with me that strength is much more than just toning muscles. It is gaining that conscious control of how we move to feel changes. Strength is meant to form new habits, not to perpetuate old habits that cause us discomfort. So that's where that body awareness is so key. And I always say physical therapy exercises is just smart strength and body awareness. That knowledge is power. Then we can use this new body awareness to apply to our lifts. So this is where we can start getting into some higher loaded exercises. So these are your stereotypical 3 sets of 10. And often I find that those basic bridges or whatever you're doing are awesome primers to lifting. So you're gaining that control and then applying it to a more loaded activity. After we've started doing this, that's where we can add in some speed work. And that's what plyometrics are. They're combining speed and strength and good control. So you can see that this process for people can take some time. It's not uncommon. I see someone for 2, 3 months where then they start feeling a lot of changes. And that's completely normal and important. It's also important to note that this can be really activity specific. So we're trying to program as physical therapists essentially a resilience plan for you so that you can keep doing the things you like to do. And also hopefully forming a new habit like flossing your teeth that you just do most days and it keeps you feeling good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Uh, it's that progression. People forget that when they're starting a new activity. and that's where we run into problems. It's the volume issue like we brought up. If you're going straight into the plyometrics, but you haven't done any of the other stuff first, that's not what we're going for. And that's when you run into problems because you haven't gotten your body used to those other things first before you try to put it all together and add speed and jumping and all those other fun movements to it.
Yeah.
So,
And a lot of gyms actually do an okay job of this,
yeah,
but we also see it not happening. And just to normalize that, because it doesn't mean even that you're injured. So the different types of pain, so that kind of maybe strain that's now turning persistent, it's usually we're looking at your volume and we are like, whoa, we need to take a step back.
yeah,
Like, you haven't ever squatted. So how are you doing squat jumps right
right.
now?
Exactly.
Let's break this down. Let's break this movement down. Let's get your body learning how to control that. Then let's load you up and then let's add in that speed.
Yeah, that brings up a good rule of thumb too is the rule of 10%. So
Yeah.
I share this with people for running, biking, weightlifting, pretty much any activity. It's a good rule of thumb to follow. So every 10 days your volume should increase by 10%. And so all that that's doing is just making sure that you are following a gradual increase in volume, intensity, activity. The activity isn't increasing too much for what your body can handle.
Yeah. And volume, like Michelle said so well, it's controlled by a lot of different things. So it's not just how much weight you're lifting or how many reps you're doing. It can be speed. It can be surface. We found that a lot with winter running
Oh
this
yeah.
year. Going into winter running and or a new activity. Well, that's a big volume change. So how do we, take a step back and be really objective about those changes? And, you know, like you said so well, Mish, is sometimes we're doing those things and having a little discomfort is completely normal.
Yeah.
So it's finding those boundaries around that, what's normal and when do we need to take that step back
Yep.
and get a little help. So,
Absolutely. And if I'm working with someone who's getting back to activity with some pain, but we're working through and managing that pain as we increase activity, I'm always reminding them to only change one variable at a time. Because
yeah.
if you're increasing the duration that you're running, but you're also increasing the speed, and maybe, there's also a whole bunch more hills in that run that you're doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you don't feel good afterwards, you're going to have no idea which variable contributed to that.
Yes.
And so changing one thing at a time is really important in those cases.
Definitely. Definitely.
So we've kind of already gotten into some examples, but one that I think is really really pertinent and at the front of mind with the pandemic is the people that we've seen who have increased activity too fast. For example, in their gym closed down for 3 months because of the pandemic, and then they go straight back to the activity that they were doing before that gym shut down. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we've seen definitely it happens in CrossFit and HIIT workout quite a bit. So, where they are backing off and maybe not doing even a whole lot at home. And then they go back into their lifts and they maybe back up of weight a bit, but not adequate enough for a 3 to 6 month break for some
Right.
people. And so they're going right back into it. And right at this point, didn't really even have a home program to maintain. Maybe again, that neuromuscular re-education we talked about. So high rep, low load bridges or clamshells or whatever they're doing, planks. So they just go back into full lifting and their body starts to feel that persistent DOMS possibly. And they're kind of doing that over and over 4 to 6 days a week. And now they are in a lot of persistent pain and we're having some, yeah, definitely nervous system response of protection. And that would be your body's doing a good job of getting you resources and getting you help. but we're definitely seeing that a ton. I don't know, Mish, if you've had a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in addition, and there was plenty of people I know too who were doing exercise and they still kept doing the classes virtually through their gym. But
Yeah,
if you don't have that all of the same equipment that you're going to go back to when you're in the
yeah,
gym again, you have to remind yourself that those are things that are going to take time to get familiar with and comfortable
yeah.
with again too.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, the number of days that you're going to the gym
Yeah,
is something that we oftentimes will modify when your body's not tolerating the amount of activity that you're doing at a certain point in
definitely.
time.
It's such a balancing act. We say that it's like Goldilocks a lot.
Yeah,
Like we have to get it just right, and how would lifting 3 days a week feel, and yoga 2 days, and
right.
if your body feels better and great doing that, and it's that good sore, good pain, minimal discomfort we expect to moderate, that's way better than moderate to high, where now you're not sleeping at night.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's not normal.
It reinforces those rest days and the importance of them.
Yeah.
And a lot of that depends on the gym that you go to. A lot of gyms do a really great job of
Hmm.
programming so that there's the heavier days and the lighter days that are giving you time to recover from those really intense workouts. But
Yeah.
if they're not doing that, that's something where then you have to change the programming that you're doing that fits your body.
Exactly. You're just learning how to listen to your body, which we've talked a lot about on this.
Yeah.
I can give you that athletic perspective. I played D1 and D3 hockey, and it took a lot of mindset shifting for me and boundary setting, because I literally had to lift and make numbers for testing, fitness testing. And so had definitely, pushed through a lot of probably bad pain at times, but pretty normal when you're competing at that level. And can't say it's great to do that, but you kind of deal with some of that stuff. And so becoming, in my now 30s, changing my perspective. I mean, it took 5 to 10 years after college hockey, even as a physical therapist, to change of, wow, my gentle rest day where I'm doing yoga are really important after my big lifting days where I'm in moderate to high exertion. And also, there are times in your life when you're not doing those moderate to high exertion workouts. The pandemic is a great example where you're kind of mentally fatigued, emotionally fatigued. I know last year and 2 years ago, Misha and I were studying for our big orthopedic board certified specialty exam. And I can't tell you how much we utilize those nice walks where we knew it was helping consolidate our memory,
Yeah.
and also helping us take a little break during this time of mental exertion. So I think it's really important to remind ourselves that, strength and movement is not about just hardcore exertion all the time. Like walking and doing some core work after that, or little gentle strength routine, actually is really good for you.
Yeah.
And oftentimes all we really need. And you can feel really strong and good doing that. And really remembering that motion is lotion. And ultimately, we're just trying to get our bodies to feel good and have less discomfort. So when we focus on that connection with ourselves and helping us connect in the world and getting out of that numbers game, I think sometimes that's really important, but also a
Yeah.
hard shift when you've had different backgrounds and you enjoy that maybe competitive atmosphere too. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And we all know there's benefits to that and there's benefits to higher intensity exercise for physical and mental health. But
absolutely, definitely.
it's all in moderation. You can't go
Yeah,
hard 110% every day because your
exactly.
body isn't made to do that. It's made to have rest days and have lighter movement days, but it's where you're at too. Where are you at in life? What else is going on? And that's going to continue to change and that's normal.
Yeah. And I remind people, like, even when we make progressions, our ultimate goal is that you're the master of yourself, and you kind of know when you push into that and when you need to back off. And that can get really person specific, but you're just learning to listen to that, and don't, like you said, we can upplay, oh my goodness, hit workouts and all that is wonderful. Truly, that's why they're so big right now. But any movement is really great
Yeah.
too. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening, and we really appreciate the questions. Keep those questions coming. We look forward to answering more in the future, and we hope you all have a wonderful week.
Take care, everyone.